Well, let's take this again. For those just joining us right now, we've been having a quick conversation. Sean Haney, you remember me. This here, Mr. Callery, what would you say you're most known for in the area? Jim Callery, everybody, if you don't know him by the face.
The thing that I've done most of the last 38 years of being a musician was a lead guitar player. So most people would know me as a lead guitar player from the Seacoast. Yep.
Lead guitar player, James?
Yep. James, Jim, anything but Jimmy.
Any nickname? Oh, no. So Jimmy's out.
Jimmy's out.
Any other
the table.
nicknames other people might know you? Because you have a long history in the Seacoast music scene.
That's true. And more recently, I decided to adopt J-Cal because my friends started calling me that in the 90s. My full name is Jim Callery. So they made an acronym, J-Cal. When I started performing as a solo singer-songwriter about a year ago, I decided to use that as my performer name.
J-Cal.
So when I perform solo, it's under the name J-Cal, yes.
Okay, so we have James, Jim, J-Cal, Callery on the show. So we were just talking before we got rolling about the growing pains. We were starting about an hour late than we usually like to, which isn't really the biggest deal. We are all here to have a conversation. But what I was letting you know is that we're 11 episodes in now, and we're still not necessarily figuring it out. We got to figure it out, but it's the kinks. And, you know, getting the, is it recording? Is this doing this? Is that doing that? Do we have enough space for that? So I appreciate you bearing with us on that. You've always been a cool guy to me, and that's part of the reason that you're here. So we'll start these a lot of times with something that I call divulgence. If there's something that I need to get off my chest or speak into the air before we get rolling, this is where I do it. And that one thing is you're a bit of an inspiration. Life keeps hitting you, and you keep standing up. And that's probably one of the most admirable things about a man, about a human being, any person, is not, do you get knocked down? Literally everybody gets knocked down. It's how many times do you stand up? And do you stand up one more time than you get knocked down? And you keep doing that. And it's incredible. That on top of that, you're a shredder. One of my favorite people to play heavy, aggressive, loud, fast things with.
We paid our dues.
It's you, that's for sure. That's for sure. And I've had a great time getting to know you over the years, and I want to get to know you more. So I find you interesting. And part of the background of this podcast is all of the insanely long list of people that I'm connected to in the area that are wildly interesting people. I think that others are going to find them interesting as well. So I sit them down for a conversation. Nothing is off limits. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. It's simply long-form conversation. So nothing is off limits.
Fair enough.
Get as controversial as you want. Go as wild as you want. We can talk about that 3-foot humanoid alien-looking thing that they just found mummified in the Amazon, if you want. Literally go all the way out there. I don't care. But
I don't know enough about it, but it definitely sounds like good fodder for a song.
Absolutely. It has 3 fingers.
Oh, I did hear about this.
3 fingers.
Yeah.
If this is legit, then, you know, rock solid possibility that that thing is something that lived on this planet prior to us, figured out how to travel light speed, did not realize that when you travel light speed, you don't return at light speed to the time that you left. It's very, very far in the future when you get back. So if they left and came back, how many times did they do that? Are they the ones that made the pyramids? And are there any more that are around and or coming back that are going to be realizing, oh my God, all of our race is now gone, and these hairless apes have nuclear warheads and they're pointing them at each other. What's happening on this crazy ass planet?
Well, I've been saying for years that everyone's looking in the sky and trying to
look in the ocean.
Underground. No. It's none of that. It's not below us. It's not above us. We are the aliens.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I the search for answers, like where did we come from? That's a valid question that I can totally get behind. But I don't think we came from here. I think we're a culmination of things happening.
Well, that's definite. That's definite. If we can literally jump into that and talk about who you are later. I mean, you're an interesting dude. People are going to find out about you as we talk. So, if here didn't exist, right? Infinite, the universe. So if the universe is infinite and this didn't exist because Earth wasn't always a thing, where did everything come from prior to that? Panspermia is definitely a thing, has to be, right? Because Earth becomes a thing, becomes a planet, eventually cools. But what is it made up of? It's made up of debris. What's that debris? Well, we know that DNA doesn't get destroyed in the vacuum of space. Some organisms don't get destroyed in the vacuum of space. So if planets get smashed and fly around in the universe all the time, which we know happens, then DNA is always flying through space and hitting things. We've been getting bombarded perpetually. So maybe the thing that wiped out the dinosaurs, that massive asteroid that hit, maybe that's how octopus got here.
Maybe.
You know what I mean? It doesn't exist in the record. Scientists are figuring out as of the last few years, octopus is an anomaly. I think I just talked about this with somebody the other day. If that's an anomaly, that must come from somewhere else. Has to. So panspermia exists, which means maybe we evolved here. Maybe we evolved here from something that has nothing to do with what we think we evolved from. There's a miss, in that connection. We figure it went the way that we figure it went. But what if humans with our DNA existed on another planet that got smashed somewhere else, and then it hit this place, which because Jupiter pushed into the solar system and cleared a spot out and made it so that Earth could have a nice long Goldilocks period, maybe this planet sprouted people because it got hit by an asteroid that was carrying DNA from people from a different planet.
I think what's most interesting about right now is what we're learning and what we're seeing is a renaissance of sorts, with the awakening that, or the realization that what we don't know what we don't know. Like that, yeah, that's a phrase that chases itself, but that's it exactly.
Yeah.
We're becoming aware now of our own ignorance, and I think that has been a problem up until recently.
Absolutely.
That the really smart people, their egos wouldn't let them see other ways or other viewpoints, and now we're starting to see things from different angles and different ways than we've been educated as such. So we're seeing a lot of explosions in different aspects of culture, from art, music to science. The conventional wisdom is being thrown out, and people are starting to ask their own questions now and really look closely at things.
Don't you find it the thing that the most confident people are the ones who run things, not the most intelligent people?
Yes.
I think that's an unfortunate thing, is when you're really, really smart, you're like, I don't know enough to know that, and you question yourself, and then that's how you learn, and that's how smart people become exceedingly smart, is they're just constantly checking and double checking and questioning and all of that. Whereas confident people are like, I got it figured out. I got it all. No, don't worry about it. I got it all figured out. And then they start running things, because people that aren't that smart listen to confident people, not smart people. Smart people sound insane to dumb people.
Well, it all depends on what it's based in, right?
Absolutely.
If it's based in ego, I practice Buddhism as much as I can, as much as I try to, and part of the premise of that is to strip oneself of the ego.
Yeah.
And people that are really smart and really advanced, like thinkers, they're almost their own worst enemies.
Talk that out.
They're so smart, they're so busy being smart that they are not able to see the error of their own ways because of things like ego. So when things like ego are brought into the equation, things like meaningful, honest, objective discussions about something like science or challenging conventional wisdom around that becomes really cloudy at that point. And I think we're seeing space and time right now where that is starting to get questioned and examined a little bit more closely. For me, that's what seemed pretty exciting.
Who was the Buddhist who said, I don't know if it was to the Dalai Lama, some Buddhist said to another, I've meditated for some number of hours, huge, thousands of hours, and I now can levitate and walk on water. And the Buddhist leader at the time said, yeah, but the ferry's only a nickel. So what is it that Buddhists can gain at the same time in terms of trying to strip ego and spending a lot of time doing it? Is it part of a Buddhist culture to be interested in psychedelics? Because that's something that I hear a lot, that whether it's DMT, salvia, or LSD, these are things that you do it once and it strips your ego completely and entirely, and you view the world differently after that.
And Sean, I'm no angel. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I'm no angel with these things. I've definitely gone there and done that when I was younger. And I think you just touched upon something very, very interesting and very pertinent to this conversation in my story personally, and that is breath work and meditation.
I've heard a lot about breath work being one of the access points that you can use.
And I've done it.
Awesome.
I've done breath work for an hour and gotten to a point where I was having a hallucination.
What did you use? Are you using the Wim Hof method, or are you using another one?
I'm pretty sure the guy that I follow, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis?
Not
Yeah.
the actor, a different
okay.
guy on Instagram.
Who just happens to have a name of one of the coolest actors ever.
Exactly. No, it's definitely not him. But I lost my train of thought.
You were talking about the breathing exercises.
Okay, so the breathing exercises, after doing some breathing exercises for an hour, I was able to get to a hallucinating point, and not with drugs, just from breathing and being present and going through the motions of it. It takes a long time to get there. But what I learned was that through breath work and through biohacking, essentially, you can bring yourself to releasing the chemicals that are in our amygdala already, like the DMT.
Or pineal gland.
Exactly.
Specifically, yeah.
You can start to see through the third eye. I was seeing visions during that episode that my third eye was showing me.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting, very colorful, very vibrant, very interesting. But I've
To come back to that.
Okay.
So keep in mind the things that you're seeing in the experience that you're having.
Mm-hmm.
That's the comeback point. A lot of people don't know because it's only just become kind of a thing in the zeitgeist. I've been familiar with the practices with all of these different things for a lot of years. And one of the things that I think is the more interesting discovery is that the human brain creates DMT natively, which is why the human body has such profound interactions with it. We have sensory receptors for it. So when our own body releases DMT, evolution says it's for a reason. It's found in all kinds of plants, it's found in all kinds of animals, some more than others. But the question then is, if we have receptors in our DNA for it, we must naturally get something from it. It must be there for a reason. It's developed that way. Or if you believe that this is a simulation, it was put there. If it was put there, it's an access point. So you need the chemical key in order to get the benefits from it or to open that world. So what I'm getting at is that the pineal gland may very well be there, so that at a certain point when your brain or your consciousness recognizes that your body is going to go through something that it shouldn't be there for, attacked by a lion, attacked by, fall down a cliff, at some point your brain goes, you don't need this, and it flushes your brain with DMT, and you don't feel the pain, you don't feel anguish, you feel nothing but love and positivity and light. And sometimes when people have out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, or they literally die on the operating table, The theory now that's emerging very, very quickly is that your brain, it's not that you're somehow leaving the dimension. It's not necessarily that you're following the light and that God is taking you. The notion of that is adapting a little bit, because it seems like what may very well be happening is that your pineal gland just washed your brain with DMT and you're literally tripping. And that's why you're looking down from the ceiling at your own body on the operating table, or you saw your life flash before your eyes. You were hallucinating. You were definitely having a trip, and it wears off. Your body processes it because it's a native chemical, and then it just flushes it. And now you're just alive and conscious and fully here. But you can access that state by using, peyote or psilocybin or LSD, DMT, like all of these different things that have been a no-no since Nixon went after his political opponents, the civil rights movement, and the hippies that were supporting them by saying,
well, we can't have too many thinkers.
no. Critical thinking needs to go away. So all of that stuff got swept into the 1970 or 71 Schedule 1 classification, so that literally everything becomes a drug except for salvia, which is a terrifying substance if you've ever done it.
I haven't.
It's one of those things where if someone were to say you can become addicted, anyone who's done it will say that's not possible. It's absolutely impossible to become addicted. You do it once and then you're kind of like, hey, well, that was enough. Message received.
Got
it. All understood completely. But it's in that classification of chemicals that are known for just blasting your ego. And if it doesn't the first time, it will the second time. If it doesn't the second time, it's coming. I've heard someone describe it at they did DMT and they saw a whole bunch of clowns with their face all in rows, and they were dancing and they were laughing and they were pointing their fingers and they were heckling, and the person gets really, really mad, and then he realized, that's me. I'm taking myself too seriously. I need to laugh at myself more. I need to drop this. And then when they woke up, they were like, my ego's gone. No ego. It's all love. And it's, the wanting for peace and good for everybody. Very generous. And it's like a life change kind of thing. So the question is, do we now need Sherpas? Sherpas for the inside?
I don't know. In a sense, of course. And that brings about another sort of sticky question, Once we start interjecting profit and like the experience and the appeal of the experience, like we've seen a major uptick in drugs becoming much more hip, like ayahuasca, that kind of stuff.
Ayahuasca and ibogaine are two that are in close focus right now because of what they're doing for neural pathway regeneration and PTSD work, and like all of what we're talking about right now. There's a lot of universities, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, taking that stuff real seriously now.
There's been a lot of studies on ibogaine, in particular to MS patients.
Yes. Good. Perfect time to talk about that. Forget about the trip. You can go back to the hallucination if you want, but I want to know, because I'll let you say.
Sure. I'm an MS patient. I have primary progressive multiple sclerosis. I've been diagnosed for almost 4 years. Any day now will be 4 years, oddly enough. And that's a many-layered onion that I'm sure we'll start to get into now, because that's very, very pertinent to music and why and how I'm here, and with the MS and everything. And
the MS is related to something, or is that happening simultaneously to something else?
The MS, for me, music, I've used the MS to basically cure the neuropathy in my hands through playing guitar. Through singing.
Interesting.
I'm resetting my vagus nerve when I'm singing. When you sing correctly, you sing from the diaphragm.
Yeah.
So those vibrations, I'm sure you've heard
Yeah.
lots about this. but the vibrations that come up through your chest reset that vagus nerve. And so it not only does the breath work help me to pace my breathing when I'm singing, but it also helps me dealing with stage fright. I don't get stage fright anymore if I do a session of maybe 10 breath works before I get up there. I reset my system.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so the breath work has had unbelievable, awesome side effects that I didn't know about when I set out. I just wanted some way to try and relieve or alleviate my anxiety and my depression.
So you're walking them together hand in hand,
Oh, absolutely.
so that other people can look into this, figure this out. Can you talk just a minute about when you say breath work? How would you describe that so that other people can kind of follow your lead on that if they could benefit from that?
Well,
What do you do? What's the practice? Are there names associated they can look up?
I would say if you wanted to do a broad general search on breath work, you're going to see a lot of things come up. But if there's like a beginner practice, I would suggest for anybody that wants to get into breath work and see how it works, it would be that look up box breathing. Box breathing is used by a lot of people for relaxation, but more importantly, box breathing can be used to help fall asleep. If you're laying in bed and you can't stop the gears from turning and you can't stop thinking about things, box breathing is one good way to turn those thoughts off. It's a form of meditation that helps you fall asleep. Me personally, I do a 6 count of box breathing when I'm trying to sleep. What that means is that I do a 1 through 6 count during the inhale, and then I hold it for a 1 through 6 count. On the exhale, it goes out, you guessed it, 1 through 6, and then you hold empty for 1 through 6. Those 4 phases of the breath are what makes it box breathing, like so equidistant all the way around.
I got it.
And what that does is that when you're focused on the breathing and doing that, your mind's no longer preoccupied with the BS from work.
So it's meditation.
It is
what's the sound of
meditation,
one hand
yes.
clapping?
Yep.
It's the thing that takes your brain and just sets it on a wave so that nothing else gets in.
And I never make it to round 3 of box breathing before I fall asleep.
And you do 4.
I do.
You set out to
I
do
never get to. I hardly ever make it through round 2.
Interesting.
And I've
So it's effective,
very effective.
and it's not chemical.
Not at all.
And
No.
it works for you. I know that it works for a lot of other people. Otherwise, it wouldn't be becoming more and more prevalent, talked about. So that's a cool one. That's a good tidbit that people can get in on. How are you using it to help your MS?
Well, the notion of singing
Yeah.
helps a lot with the MS. So the simple act of expressing myself and the vibrations that come from within, getting that sound out, emitting that sound, for me personally, it resets something within me that allows me to focus more clearly and not be clouded by all the other stuff that goes along with having MS. And for the record, I don't take any medication at all.
Yeah, I wanted to. I'm glad that you're saying these things because I don't want to make you divulge something that you don't want to.
Anything's fair game, Sean.
Anything's okay.
Absolutely.
Open book.
Yep.
I grew up in a time of building computer systems for large healthcare providers to secure their HIPAA files and all of that stuff. So it's always in the front of my mind. Don't talk about anybody else's stuff. Let them say it and then talk about it. So I appreciate your candor there. So you have MS. You've opted to go the non-pharmaceutical route. And what did you see was the difference between what pharma was doing for you and what you're doing for yourself now? And how are those two worlds different? Maybe you're doing pharma and you haven't affected your diet yet. and then you decide I'm going to go no pharma and I'm going to work on the diet and box breathing. Like, what do those two different worlds look like? What's different?
So when I was getting diagnosed, my first neurologist had told me that it could be one of two things. It could be MS or it could be NMO. NMO is, it's a very, very rare disease that basically it affects all of your systems and it shuts them down one at a time. It's basically torture, a slow torture. Like, it's not, like, it's 100 times worse. It's almost like something out of a sci-fi movie, to be honest with you. It doesn't even sound real to me. So when they told me I might have that or MS, I don't know.
You're like, come on, MS.
Was it trying to soften the blow? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it could be this horrible thing, or it only could be MS. And
Was it a Jedi mind trick? I don't know.
That would be a really funny tact for the doctor to take.
It really would be.
But
when
hopefully they don't like take that and run with it, all doctors, because your dentist might be like, well, it could be cancer. But then again, it could also be a cavity. And then you're like, oh, God, I hope it's a cavity.
Well, whatever the disease was, and even though it was not diagnosed yet, I looked up, you know, they're both autoimmune conditions, basically. And at the root cause of every autoimmune condition, pretty much, inflammation is the huge problem.
Yeah.
So I thought either way, no matter if I have either one, getting this inflammation under control will only benefit me no matter what situation I have to deal with. So I gave up dairy and I gave up gluten. I gave them up immediately overnight. In that moment, I made a decision, and I haven't had dairy or gluten in 4 years. That's controlled the inflammation a lot.
I bet.
I'm occasionally symptomatic, but I'm so much better than I was 4 years ago when I first got diagnosed. So basically, I did it through diet change, severe lifestyle change, taking up things like the meditation, the breath work, and now I'll touch on something else, the cold plunges. I do cold plunges in the ocean in the winter, as you know, Sean, but the viewers may not. So wanted to talk a little bit about that. We were talking earlier about, you know, the chemicals that get stored in our amygdala.
Yeah.
We have access to them. Well, when I do a cold plunge, I lay in the ocean, just about 6 inches of water, maybe 8 inches of water. And I lay for 1 to 2 minutes as long as I can tolerate. And what that does is it releases all kinds of yummy endorphins, you know, dopamine, adrenaline, all that kind of stuff. So for a few days after the plunge, even my skin glows brighter. Like, it's really, it has unbelievable, profound effects. While I'm laying on the ocean or in the ocean, I'm simultaneously grounding. There's a lot of debate whether or not grounding does anything.
I'm sure it does.
I am too.
Talk to any gardener. When their hands hit the dirt, they feel calm. They feel relaxed. They love everything around them a little bit more. Yeah, there's no. I 100% am with you on that. You don't need to sell me on that one. There's electrical currents running through, magnetism running through this entire planet, and there's no way that beings evolve on it without some kind of connection to it. And for us to walk around with rubber on our feet,
it's a little silly.
Constantly.
Sure.
This is a new thing that really hasn't been going on longer than 100 or so years. People used to walk around with their feet in the dirt a lot more than we do now. And there's, without question, as RFK Jr. pointed out to all of us emphatically over the last year, there is a massive problem in this country with health. We all know it. We're all experiencing it. And a lot of it ties back to inflammation and some of these things that you were talking about, and reducing it and seeing an impact on your body in a positive way, even when it's at against all odds, it's helping and it's having a profound impact. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. Grounding, getting your feet literally touching soil is important. We have current in us,
Yep.
and we need to discharge. So the best way to do that is to ground.
Yep.
Cold plunge, massive help with inflammation.
And I do it in the ocean in particular because the salt water is really good for your
Massively
skin.
good for you.
So I'm getting some grounding, I'm getting some earth love,
Yeah.
the cold shock of that. And a lot of people, I've definitely been questioned or maybe borderline criticized. Why would you do that if you're an MS patient? Like, we have mobility issues. Why would you go in the ocean in the winter? That's crazy. And that's a fair question because someone with mobility issues maybe shouldn't be going to the ocean in February.
Alone.
Like, I see that. Right, exactly.
Not absolute. I don't think anybody should act absolute. So tying all the way back to the very beginning, anybody that says they have something all figured out is selling you something.
Right.
So if anybody is really, really positive and confident about something and they say, no, I know this for absolute certain, that's the first person I think is confused.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying all kinds of stuff and you're not simply relying on pharma, then it means you need to have your eyes open to literally everything, try everything. And what's the downside?
Right.
You know?
Nobody told me what to do. Nobody told me how to manage this. And I don't like the word disease, though that's what it is. I prefer to use the word condition.
Sure.
Because it's no longer making decisions for me.
Valid. It's a good way of looking at it, too, then. It totally justifies the change of
And it did
condition.
for a long time. But disease makes it sound like there's not really any hope. And while there's no cure for MS, hope is the one thing any of us have left at the, without hope, there aren't dreams.
Yeah, everything
That stuff
crumbles.
is- and then the magic starts to fade away. So without that, where's the fun and the magic and the mystery of life,
Right.
So I think it's important to remember those things. Everything that I've done, the diet, the meditation, in the music, all those things have served me very well regarding my MS and my situation. Getting back to my music after going through a lot of personal problems was pretty much the last place I had left to turn, and boy, am I glad that I did it, because it continues to breathe new life into me.
So you'd say music saved your life?
You could say that, yeah.
I would say the same thing for myself, and I know that's the truth for lots and lots of people who are musicians. To the extent that even if someone would consider it an obstacle because, well, that's time that you could have spent making more money, it's like that was never an option. It's not a thing on the table where if you're making music to be sold, it's a commodity. If you're making a commodity, you're making basically marketing fodder to make yourself money using attention, which is fine. If you want to market what you're doing that way, that's fine. But
Sure.
Some people use it as a vehicle for art, and they, like with my band Cursed on Earth with Brian and Justin and Curtis, if it sounds like anything that we've heard before, we immediately change it. New, completely creatively different, and pushing into areas that people haven't thought of taking music. That's our kind of our thing. Some people use it as therapy, and they take music that moves them, and they just get really good at playing it and losing themselves to it. And then others use it in a different kind of therapy. They use it to try and center themselves, to focus themselves, and to I think this may be in the vein that you were talking about. So maybe you take over in describing, but in a form of therapy where it's not for anybody else, but if somebody else gets something from it, okay, great.
I think music is an exchange of energy between the performer and the audience.
Beautifully put.
And that when those stars align, then the conversation is happening within the room between both. It's not, and even within the band. So a good band to me is like a good conversation, like we're having. Like we each listen to each other and then we take our turn to talk. It's not someone waiting to speak.
Yeah.
Like we're listening to each other, we're engaging. A real band, a real good band that has a lot of respect and love for the thing rather than their ego can get to those points.
It's a huge thing.
And it's many different people play music for many different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in some ways, it makes it a little easier to spot the real ones, aside from the not so real ones.
That's true. And that's not to cut down anybody that is doing music because they want to be seen, because that's the thing that they want to use. Like, but I say performance musician. I used to have the biggest chip on my shoulder about if you're doing music that sounds exactly like other music and you're just trying to use your image and a marketing machine to make yourself look like a big popular musician, and then people are like, oh, you're a musical genius. If you don't correct them and say, I am not a musical genius, I'm doing a staged trick, I'm making you think that I am a thing that you're recognizing, and I'm doing it well, that's a performance artist. I used to think that those were just garbage human beings. Like, I gave them no respect. And then I realized, no, it's just this little omission of a fact. And I do think that's lying. But that omission of a fact is the reason that I'll give the Rolling Stones and their early music all kinds of props. But I hold back on the Beatles. When the Beatles were being told that they were geniuses and they were like these visionaries, they weren't giving credit to where they were getting a lot of their influences. The Rolling Stones immediately said, you're out of touch. All these things that we're doing are being developed by black artists in the south of the United States. We're basically paying homage to some really cool things that have been happening for the past 30, 40, 50 years there. You're just finally seeing them because you only pay attention to white people. They were bold enough to say that. The Beatles didn't, until they did a bunch of drugs.
Yeah. Well, I think they definitely have wildly different stories.
Oh, yeah.
The time and the place both have a lot to do with both of those cases.
Could totally say the same thing about Elvis also.
Absolutely.
He was doing the same thing that was being done around him, but people just weren't paying attention to black artists. I mean, other black people were.
Of course.
Some very, very progressive, non-hate-filled white people were, but the vast majority of people in the U.S. were not paying attention to black artists at all.
Very true. And I think that's one of the first to really challenge that way of thinking, was that in the main spotlight would be James Brown. There were, you could certainly argue there were others before him that started to cross that line.
Frank Sinatra.
Oh, yeah?
I didn't give credit to Frank Sinatra until realizing that Frankie brought Sammy Davis Jr. along with him.
Right.
And he would bring him into clubs, and they would have to make a decision. Do we cancel on Frank Sinatra, or do we allow this black man into our club? And Frank Sinatra did that constantly. He got thrown out of venues. They wouldn't play him anymore. So he would go to a different venue, a smaller venue somewhere nearby where they would allow a black person in. And then Frank Sinatra would be playing that place. And everyone would go, oh, that must be the place now, and blow up that place instead of that place. But he did that over and over and over again. It was one of the coolest things that I've ever heard about Frank Sinatra, was that he was that kind of guy.
That is pretty cool.
Really cool. And he was a young dude too. He was on his way up. He didn't need to do that. He was going to become a massive thing. And he really rolled the dice on that one. You know, that was him basically saying, this is humanity. This is bigger than whatever the hell you think we're doing here. I'm an entertainer. I'm here to entertain people. And these are people too. Some people had a problem with that, and he did not want to associate with them, which, baller move.
It takes guts, you know, to be the first one to go out on the ice.
Yeah.
That takes guts. And he was one of them, thankfully, obviously, you know,
Yeah.
because he sort of challenged a lot of the way people thought about stuff and music and fashion and pop culture. Like he shined a light on
Shined a good one too.
and on all aspects of it.
Yeah.
So there's the good and bad of the dichotomy of being a human being, and I think that's what music reminds us of. That we
Agreed.
all have that potential. That there's good and bad in everything, and you know, we're lucky to be musicians. We're very lucky that the universe chose us as conduits for that energy. Because I believe that music is a manifestation of love and energy. And this is meant in a very loose way. But you can't have, by definition, you can't have music without the existence of the love that goes into it in order to create it and to learn the craft of doing it. So it's born of love, and then it's preserved through love, and then it carries on after it's birthed and grows with love. So music is that, and I can't think of anything else other than, you know, maybe food that gets people together like that. But music is very
Interesting.
very powerful in that sense. It's
Nourishing.
It's a mystery. Like they don't know where it comes from, why some people get it, why some people don't. Like it's
What a great
crazy.
comparison, though, to food, because both of those things, music, art, and food, nourish.
Mm-hmm.
They nourish different attributes of your perceived reality, your existence.
Yep.
One of them is your body, your physical, and the other one is your cognitive, your mental. So if you're talking about nourishments and what works and what doesn't, the same idea about music appealing to some and not to others, or some being acquired tastes, and it's like, well, I didn't like that when I was younger, but I do kind of now. That's very much the same with food.
Mm-hmm.
And why some people use cilantro. Like, can you imagine being a person who is one of those who tastes cilantro and immediately has like a repulsion to it? Like they taste a chemical. It tastes like they're eating like dishwashing fluid. But Courtney is one of them, my wife.
Barbara was the same way.
She tasted chemical.
She didn't like cilantro. It
Can you
tasted
imagine
like
being from
evil to her?
Yeah, that's the same. So can you imagine being from Central America, Central South America, and that being your physiology, and literally everybody's like, throw some cilantro on that, throw some cilantro on that, and you're the one who's like, can I have mine without? Everyone's just like, record screech. What a bummer. But that's like, it's kind of the same thing with Scandinavian death metal, right? That comes on, a lot of people go, ooh, I'm going to leave now.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're from Sweden, or if you're from Finland, or like if that comes on and you're averse to it, everyone's kind of like, what's your problem?
Well, music is a collection of frequencies, right?
Yes.
So I think if it's one thing we can take from the laws of attraction, that certain frequencies speak more so to certain people than they do to others. Like, there are exceptions to what I'm about to say, but generally speaking, there aren't many metalheads that love reggae. There are exceptions.
Sure, okay.
But generally speaking, people kind of gravitate towards what they know and they like. The open-minded, the adventurous, the artistic ones, like you and I, know better. So we know not to be confined to one section of the cafeteria.
Yeah. Sample from everything.
Yeah, see what you like. And like you just said, with food, it changes as we grow.
Yeah.
Our taste buds change, and our appreciation changes, especially for music. You know, we met many years ago, and the guitar player that I used to be and the drummer that you
Drummer
used to
that I
be
used to be.
are very, very different people than the two guys sitting here right now. But I think the thing that still ties us together and that we still have in common is the intent behind the music. And that's the common thread that we always had, that we both loved it and meant it.
Oh, yeah.
We never recorded anything, Sean, but we would jam for hours in your attic.
Did we not record anything?
I don't think we did. This would be like before the advent of cell phones or hard disk recorders. Like that was.
I was tracking to my computer whenever I had it set up, but I would only set it up if I were doing things that I were going to be messing with.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why I never hit record. That was heavy during my Audemos Pandera time, which was
We were dark and heavy for sure.
yeah, that was a fun project. I don't know that you and I ever took stage with that.
No.
A number of times. God, I can't think of how many shows we did. I was playing with Jeff Duchesne, guitar player, and Dewey, John Ducharme. He was playing bass with us. We did one show at the Barley Pub with Rob Zeminski from The Scream. It was, that was a banger of a night. Literally everybody that I can think of came out to that one. That was a good showing. But it was one of those ones where I brought Audemos, and what we did was it was always made up on the spot. Everything was improv, and we would have a conversation, and we all knew to look for cues. If somebody was going to go off on something, don't change what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing and wait for them to cue you. And when they cue you, they're either saying you take over the conversation now and you adapt to what they're saying. You don't start talking about something completely different that they had.
Right.
You give them your version of what they were just doing, and they'll give room for you, and then you kind of pass it around. It's the fundamental nature of like a jam,
Or jazz.
or jazz, and those two are pretty close. So my background initially being in metal, metal is very close. Oftentimes, people who like metal, they also like classical. Because they're a lot of times composed in kind of similar ways, depending on which classical artist you're listening to, of course. But really, they're kind of along the same vein. So when you get into jazz, it would be like a fractured composition, whereas you're taking all kinds of good ideas, not running them all at the same time, but passing them around almost like in a jam.
Yeah.
Can't do that really well at all with like structured, rigid pop music where it's the same formula just kind of run over and over again, which is fine with me. I have no interest.
So years ago, I read an article with Frank Zappa in Musician Magazine. I think the article came out around 1986 or 1987. I still have it at home. And the guy conducting the interview asked Frank, how come you don't play the solos off of Joe's Garage like the way that you did it then live? How come you don't play those solos live? And I thought his answer was so poignant. He said, because I've already done that.
Did that one. You can go listen to it. It's on the album.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, why would I do?
Brilliant.
You guys have already heard that. And
You just want to hear me do it live? Is that what it is?
Amy Winehouse said something similar. And they were like, how come you don't sing your songs the same way? And she said, because I already did that way. I don't want to do what I've already done. And I got a lot of criticism through the years of people I played in bands with because I refuse, even to this day, to write guitar solos, traditional guitar solos. And my drummers hated me because I wouldn't write a 4-measure solo. They wanted to know, when are you going to be done? And I would say, I don't know. Maybe 11 seconds, maybe 11 minutes. And they would
Listen for it.
They would get so mad. And I would say, if you listen, you'll know when I'm done because I play in phrases. So if you listen to me, you'll know when I'm done. And if you look at me, we can exchange some glances and I can give you some body language that lets you know where I'm at.
Yeah. Like it's simple. The one that works the best is a nod, or when you look back at somebody and you do that, just like a head nod.
Yep.
Like we're coming to the end of this one, so don't jump in right now.
Right. But soon.
I'm
We're
finishing
getting
this
there.
phrase, and that's the transition.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the easiest one. But there's cues that you can throw off.
And I prefer to keep it raw that way. I mean, I generally have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to be playing for a solo. Like, I know what notes I have access to.
Sure, there's only so many.
The geeky stuff of modes and scales and all that kind of stuff. I try not to think about that stuff too much while I'm playing. Because when you're thinking about doing something, you're no longer doing the something. You're just thinking about doing it. And that's not the same.
Yeah.
Playing guitar and thinking about playing guitar are not the same.
That's interesting. You're getting close to something that depending on the company, I'll pull back just a little bit because I don't want to offend people who make reading music and teaching music and how to read music, like all of that stuff, their life. But I worked in Daddy's Chunky Music when I first moved back from New York. And I got to see all of the different kinds of musicians. Like we've been talking about. There's a lot of different people who are using music as a pathway, as a gateway, as an art form, as a medium, any number of different reasons. And there were some similarities. You could not necessarily put people in camps, but there were some similarities. And every single time a person came through and told me that they either went to or were attending Berklee, they all fell into one camp. Talented players, most of them. Talented players. Very good at reading and writing the language of music. But almost entirely uninspired, uncreative, and you could tell who their teachers were and what their interests were based on what they were learning and how they were applying the lessons and the tools that they were given and all of that stuff. And it was very rarely something that was pulled out of the ether, something that the muse directly gave as a gift, some wildly original, completely creative idea. Or a brand new tool to use to create a type of music. And when I talk to people that don't read music, but have some kind of a way of communicating using music, a lot of times what they do is they're dialing directly, meditatively into the creative stream, and they're coming up with things that are so far outside of convention that they haven't been thought of, which means they haven't been created, which means they haven't been listened to. So what I used to say, tongue in cheek, please, everybody, tongue in cheek, I'm kidding. Love you, Berklee people, love you. Whatever music department you came from, whether it's St. Louis Music Conservatory or anywhere else, love all musicians, but I would say very tongue in cheek, Berklee students are great at learning and showing you how to play other people's music.
Yep.
People who do the creative deep diving into the ether, into the muck, and pulling back beautiful snippets and things that are just completely pioneering and different, so many of them don't read music.
Right.
They're dialing directly into that creative flow, and they're going, look at this weird thing. You don't need to know how to read music to do that.
No.
You do need to read music to tell them what they just did and explain it to somebody else who reads music.
To speak the language, sure.
Correct.
Absolutely. And I like to say, when this conversation comes up with me, I think, I just had a conversation with somebody about this the other day, and we were talking about sheet music, and he was asking me, can you sight read? And I said, I can, but I'm a little out of practice, so if I started doing it regularly, I would be able to sight read like I used to when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It's a practice that you have to keep up on, I said,
Right.
but I don't really have a desire to sight read. And he said, well, don't you want to know what the music is?
Oh, I know what the music is.
And
You're mistaken, sir.
And I said, I that's not the music that I'm looking for. And he said, what do you mean? If it's not in a staff, if it's not like quarter notes and melodies and the science and the math are all right there in the sheet music, then what is music? If it's not that, then what is it? And I said,
You're about to find out.
I said, music is everything that's not on the sheet.
Okay.
I
take your meaning, definitely. I would say that some music ends up on the sheet.
Sure.
Because once you create it.
Right.
Once you create it, and somebody who speaks music fluently, beautifully, perfect pitch, can listen to anything, no matter how complex it is, and then score it.
Yeah.
They'll put it down there, but they didn't create it.
Right.
That person that doesn't read music created it. And they don't need what you just did to do that. If you want to show somebody else how to do what that person just did, you need that. Or you need to show them actually what they did. But the easiest way to keep something and remember it forever prior to being able to just record it, which we can all do now, the way to do that was to write it down, to score it.
Sure.
Because then any person can play Mozart's music. And anyone who practices well, you know.
At this point, I definitely would like to bring up something that's very pertinent to the Seacoast music scene. Very, very important.
By all means, bring up whatever you want.
And around 98, 99, I got stuck in a rut with my guitar playing. I get stuck with what some of us guitar players would call the rock box rut. I couldn't play out, I couldn't find a way to get out of that pentatonic scale, that blues scale that most guitar players start with and get stuck with and stay there for the rest of their lives. I knew there was more I didn't understand. So I started taking jazz lessons, and I started taking jazz lessons from a guy around here by the name of Woody Allen, and I'm not kidding, his name was really Woody Allen. A lot of the older cats from the press room know him as the Woodman. And the Woodman opened up my playing and my understanding of music tenfold. And after a few months of lessons with him, I went on to write music and form my band Buddha Pillar, which
I remember that band.
was an awesome experience, an awesome band, an awesome time in my life. It was a lot of fun. So I forgot where I was going with that, but
Talking about taking the lessons from Woodman and what he opened up your mind and your playing abilities, and
yeah,
I'm guessing that's where your
exactly
ability
what
in
it
metal
was.
came from.
That's exactly what it was. I started thinking about chord voicings differently. I started thinking about songs and the structure of dynamics and feelings and textures, and applying those things to the way that I was writing the songs that I was learning. I mean, one of my homework assignments for Woody was to go out and buy a CD copy of Miles Davis' Kinda Blue. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite albums. There's just, and you know, Miles is real easy to point to because
It's a great album.
everybody knows, but I think,
Repeat it.
I think,
What's the
so what?
for the people? What was the album again?
So what?
So what? Miles Davis.
Here they are. Without these folks, taking Seacoast Entertainer to the next levels wouldn't be happening. Not to this scale. Tangram 3DS actively supports our music and arts scene and has proudly been part of it for the last 20 years. Their creative pros bring vision to life with everything from 3D renderings and VR to video, animation, web design, and branding. As a team of artists living and working on the Seacoast, Tangram considers a thriving local culture essential to us all for the connections we make, communities we build, and creativity we foster. Visit tangram3ds.com to learn more, see their work, and imagine what they can do for you.
Welcome back, everybody.
Kind of Blue, that was the name of the album.
Kinda
So
Blue.
what was the song?
Yeah. So welcome back, everybody. The smart thing to do is when watching this podcast, if we mention a band or a name of an album or something comes up, hit pause, listen to it, come back, So I'm guessing people are just coming back now. So
Nice.
about it, now they've just listened to it.
I think what was so special about Miles Davis is that he played his trumpet as though it was an extension of his body.
Yeah.
Like the way a good singer uses their voice as an instrument, not something to prop up their ego, but rather to play music. Singers that are really good, they sing like it's an instrument because it is,
Yeah.
not for other reasons. And so that's my thoughts on it anyway. I think Miles had access to those other channels, those other worlds, those other dimensions that maybe some of us don't, but he was able to show us what that sounded like through his music.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made him so special.
And that is something to the credit of those who go and learn the language fluently. The ways to arrive places that exist are many. There's a plethora of ways to get to anything, hence inversions, and making it easier to play through. So to that end, going and deep diving and learning and putting into practice all of the different types of tools and ways of creating, as long as you have that fundamental connection to the creative, that meditative desire, that desire to to lead with love rather than marketing material, to be creative and to seek out and evolve your own practice.
Right.
If you have that massive, extensive tool set, you can very quickly be effective. So to that, I'll definitely give credit to that. I would never dissuade anybody from going and getting a degree or learning, but just based on lived experience and watching what comes of it, if you simply, after high school, go down to Berkeley and enroll and think that's going to make you a tremendous musician, no. You're just the kid on the ski slopes who's been skiing for 8 days with all brand new everything, head to toe, and everybody looking at you going, all right, we'll see how this goes.
I think guitar players are the worst offenders, and
How so?
of that, because it's fairly easy to learn to play guitar, especially now. There's so many YouTube channels, and when I was growing up, you could buy tablature books to read how to play. You didn't even have to know how to read sheet music. You could use tablature and sort of cheat. And that's lost. And I think guitar players have it easier because you can learn a couple power chords, a couple riffs, a couple cool things, a couple cool changes, and kind of be on your way. And that's where it stops for a lot of people. I think guitar players, a lot of them get stuck at the distinction between being a guitarist and being a musician.
Oh, valid.
And I know for me, I was stuck as a guitar player for a long time. The second I decided I wanted to become a better musician, I became a better guitar player because I was no longer concerned about that. I was more interested in being a bigger piece of the puzzle
Yeah.
instead of trying to satiate my ego or impress people.
That's a good tie back to that ego thing. As long as that's existing. So maybe that's the biggest thing. That's the thing that I'm not tying into that idea or that understanding is the person that walks into a music store and says to the person behind the counter, yeah, I'm at Berkeley. I went to Berkeley. They're carrying around their ego as an armor. That's
badge,
not.
yeah.
That's them flexing at me, or anybody else that they may be talking to, and it's not necessarily them saying I have a greater connection to the musical underpinnings of reality. What they're saying is I speak fluently, and I want you to understand that I am somehow of prominence when it comes to the topic of music. When so many people that just walked in before them did not tell me where they went to school, did not tell me how many albums they've written or how many they've tracked on or any of the other things. They just simply said, Can I get a pack of 9s and I don't know what kind of cable? Which is basically what it came down to.
Well, so when I started out on my adventure for open mics last year in January of 24,
We love open mics on this show. Before you finish that thought, tell me what are the open mics that are your favorites around the area?
the Stone Church on Sunday nights
Awesome.
would be probably my favorite one, and a close second would be Thursday night at Earth Eagle North.
Another killer. Dave Ogden, legendary.
They're both really, really good. Tonight is Monday, so there's one called, I think it's at Napolitano's, Night School is what they call it. It's more of an open jam.
Night
for
School
players.
Jam.
Yep.
I did see them post about that in the Seacoast Music Scene group earlier.
Yep.
And Courtney asked me if there was music going on there tonight because Brian Kelly, another legendary area player, he was going down to that.
I know Brian.
Yeah, yeah. I think something to recognize for anybody that's watching this and doesn't know the open mic circuit. The open mic circuit in this area is different than most places. There are beginners. There are people that are just trying it out, but my God, are there seasoned killers, devoid of ego, just having fun with it. And
Yeah.
my God, the mixer of musicians that are out, like, I feel bad for anybody. I was just talking to somebody earlier. They messaged me and they wanted to introduce themselves to me, which is fine. I never bother legends, killers in the area, but if they want to reach out to me, if they say hi, if they say something to me, I'll absolutely add them. I mean, I'll be friends with everybody, but I'm not collecting friends.
Right.
Messaged me and said, hey, I want to do more in the music scene. So if you know anybody that's looking for a guitar player, and I suggested, hit this mic and this mic and this mic and this mic. There's killers everywhere. And he was like, hey, I mean, I've been in this band and this band and this band. I've got recordings here and there and there. And, was just letting me know. And that's one of those things where I had to respond and be like, that's fine, man, but I think you've got a preconceived notion. I'm not trying to talk down to you. I'm not trying to say you're probably a nobody and you should go hang out with a bunch of open micers. What I'm telling you is that there are bona fide world-class killers at all these open mics
For sure.
in the area. And if you're looking to put something together, look no further than Congregation X. Mm-hmm. Like, there are absolute bona fide slayers that come to these open mics. And if you want to put a project together, it's easy. Mm-hmm. It's easy. It's like they're all giving you a display of what they can do. Make a collage.
And that guy who will remain nameless, because I don't know who you're talking about, for one. And
No, I
for two,
wouldn't.
I don't like to single anybody
I wouldn't
out,
say the
but-
name anyway. It's a misconception that I think a lot of great players in the area have, and I think they should get over it.
I completely agree with you. I know for myself, I can be honest and say I definitely had more of an ego when I was younger.
Yeah, everybody does.
And that kind of gets in the way.
It 100% gets in the way.
And so
Spoiler.
I don't. I was having a conversation with somebody the other night, and I was saying that I get nervous every time I get up to sing. Doesn't matter if I'm doing one song or three or
That's how you know
3
you're
hours.
alive.
I get nervous every time. And she said, really? I said, yep. She said, I would never have guessed that. After having seen you perform, I would have not guessed at all that you were even remotely nervous. She's like, you do what you do with such conviction that I couldn't imagine it any other way. And I was like, well, now you know.
Yeah. Doesn't necessarily go away. I don't
No.
feel much at all.
It doesn't dominate me anymore. The breath work is how I'm able to trigger that, to reset it so that I'm not, oh my God, all the eyeballs are on me. It's all right, just do the thing that you're here to do. That's all that matters. Just try to channel that energy and that focus in the right direction.
Yeah.
And not on nervousness, because again, when you're thinking about doing something, you're not doing the something, you're just thinking about it. And those are not synonymous.
Yeah, it's about being present. Mm-hmm. Breathe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, try not to shake too much. Mm-hmm. Fake it if you need to.
Yeah.
I had a trick when I was younger. I don't get stage fright at all. It doesn't matter how big a crowd I'm in front of. And it's because when I was younger, and this is going to sound horrible, I don't mean it for a second, but it's a tool. It's a mechanism that you can use. And if you're on stage and there's a bunch of people down staring at you and you have to do something and it's going to be tough and you know it's going to be tough because you worked yourself into a corner. You've made something that's truly unique and you've worked your muscle memory as much as you can to try and make sure you do it correctly, but it's not something that's been with you forever. You know, it's not like knocking out a song that you've known since you were 12. It's a brand new thing. And you've got this tiny little spark and you're trying to keep it from going out. And you need to get on stage now and show a bunch of people who know how to do what you're doing. You need to show them this new thing without falling to pieces. What you can do is you can tell yourself in that moment, I'm on stage and you're down there watching me because I'm better than you. Even if you believe it for only 3 seconds, it's enough to get you going. And now you're just doing the thing that you've been working on practicing.
You're removing the hesitation.
I don't mean it for a second.
I understand.
It's all
how
love.
you mean it. Yep.
But even if it's just to make yourself chuckle and break tension,
Yep.
it works beautifully. I'm up here and you're down there because I'm better. Now watch this.
Well, what's interesting about that is that for the last 38 years of my musicianship, I started when I was 13. I'm 51 now, so excuse me. Predominantly, I was a lead guitar player, and that's pretty much what I've gotten to be known as.
Kind of the racehorse of the band.
Sure. And in the last year, I stepped into the role as singer-songwriter. That's what I do with these open mics. That's what a lot of my friends in the open mic community know me as. A lot of them that know me don't even know I'm a lead guitar player. I've never even heard me play guitar like that. So it's going to be kind of surprising when that comes out because it's going to start happening sooner than later. But I've been holding that back. That's the thing I'm good at. That's the easy thing.
It's hilarious that you'd say that because I'm a similar way. People have heard me play with Cursed on Earth for a long time. People that know me for a long while, they heard me play with Division Tree. But you've got to know me since like your days to know I'll knock out Lamb of God and some Mastodon, some Meshuggah. Like heavy. Big fan of Pantera, like metal.
Yeah.
Aggressive music.
Yeah.
Love it. My God, I love it. But they don't see me play that because I don't play in metal bands anymore.
Right.
So I'll do something at a show and I'll throw down like some heavy, riff, just doing like a sound check or something. Like dial this, give me the tom, dun, 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 bass drum, boom, boom, and then, okay, whole kit. If I just launch into like Laid to Rest from Lamb of God, all right, everybody, welcome back. That's very different than what I play in Cursed on Earth. So different that people will just go, what's happening? What is that? I would imagine that's you. If people know you as now J. Cal, the singer-songwriter, if you launch into what you and I were doing and you're just like,
We should do some crazy stuff,
like, dude, wild shredder. So
Thank you for saying that.
It's just fact. I mean, I'm bringing it up because it's real. It's a part of your past and part of my past. Shared history on that one.
Yep.
Is that something that you're able to do still, or is that?
Yes.
So MS didn't kill that.
It did for a minute.
But you got it.
I had to retrain myself how to play guitar. When I first got diagnosed 4 years ago, I could barely play a G chord.
Ooh.
And I've been playing guitar at that time for 34 years. My neurologist said, I'm going to be realistic with you, Jim. You're probably not going to get back anything that you've already lost. Like MS does irreversible brain damage, and I can't promise you're going to get back anything.
But you got it back.
Oh, yeah. I had neuropathy in my hands, like really severe, and I would say it's virtually cured at this point.
And that was diet, breathing,
Diet, exercise, and playing guitar every day. and
cold plunging.
So I guess if there's a distinction I want to have it be known about MS that I don't think people understand, it's this. MS disrupts the connection between the brain and the body. So if you want to do something that you've always done and taken for granted, it's not as easy as it used to be. The simple notion of walking to your car from the mall entrance to your car.
Yeah.
Imagine if everything that you do, you have to think about doing it while you're doing it so that you're telling your brain to be thinking about moving those muscles while they're moving. It's no longer autonomous.
Okay.
It's something that has to be,
So you got to be deliberate and literal with your brain.
you have to be obsessed with it and
Yeah.
thinking about it so that you can retrain your brain to form new synapses, connections,
Yeah.
to relearn how to do things that maybe you can't do anymore.
Which is what they've discovered Ibogaine does.
Yeah.
Ibogaine doesn't just. So, from what I'm understanding, I haven't done it. I would not be opposed to it. It's another one of those ones where there is no addicted to it. When you do it, what it's being equated to is basically taking an extremely hastily packed suitcase that's not just the clothes you need for the trip, but a pencil sharpener, a dog bowl, 16 raisins, like all kinds of bad habits and things that don't make any sense to be stuffed into that suitcase. It unpacks all of it and it lets you go, okay, this is garbage, that can go in the trash. And it's now like addictions. If you're addicted heavily to opioids or alcohol, Ibogaine, one treatment, disconnects it. So you don't feel that need to smoke a cigarette, to take pills, to drink. And it lets you take the addiction and throw it in the trash. And pack your suitcase with all the things that mean something to you. Love, happiness, hope, music, community service, family, laughing. Take all of the things that mean something to you in life and orderly pack it into that suitcase. So that's the tool set side of it. The other side of it is the medical side, the physiological side. What they're discovering is that it's actually helping to regrow synapses in the brain. It's helping to regrow brain matter.
And I think it helps, there's promising evidence that it can help rebuild myelin, which is essentially
Yes.
the main problem with my situation.
Yes.
So it's strange that they're going through all these trials and that there's a whole lot of hoopla about the legalization or the use of Ibogaine. Like, I think it's crazy. But so many things like that, you know.
Think about what it disrupts, though. It disrupts a massive medical and pharmaceutical industry, one that does not want to be disrupted.
No, it doesn't. I took myself off of the MS medication about 4 months ago, and I've never felt better in the last 4 years than I do right now. And being off the medicine was the right choice for me. Now, we'll see through MRIs and blood work, they're going to track the development or non-development of my situation, and we'll know. And if they think or they have proof that I should be on the medicine, they're going to do everything they can to get me back on it.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure with diet, exercise, and the things that I'm doing, and I'm not a medical expert, but I'm pretty sure that those things have been the thing that's put my situation into an arrested development.
Yeah.
It's no longer getting worse.
Yeah.
If anything, it's getting better.
And that's the only thing that you can really look at is benchmarking your own personal lived experience. Where if you're not looking, you can't say, well, it's not there because I'm not finding it because you're not looking.
Right.
But you're constantly looking and analyzing and considering. And where you're constantly doing that, I don't know anybody better to tell you what's happening with you than you. Especially if it's something that isn't fully understood. and clearly it's not, because the people who clearly understood it prescribed a course of action for you that was incorrect.
For that medication, for a lot of people, works wonders. There's no question about it. And maybe it did at first. Maybe it did help. Maybe it had a lot to do with where I'm at today. Maybe that was a part of it. Maybe it was everything I did together with that. I don't really know.
Do you think there's a possibility that in conjunction it could work?
Yes.
Now that you know, all of these other things needed to exist as well, so maybe the medication will now help in ways that it didn't before. Is that a possibility?
That is possible. The reason I didn't like the medication was that it depletes us of our B cells. B cells are what fights off infection.
Yeah, you want B cells.
If I do a lot of open mics. I did 200 last year. If I go to an open mic and I'm on the Ocrevus, which depletes my B cells, and someone gives me a cold, that cold for an MS patient is not a 2 or 3 day ordeal like it would be for you or most normal people. For an MS patient, that turns into a 2 or 3 week severe sickness.
Yeah.
And living alone, that's not a great
Not a good option.
That's not a good option, no.
No.
So, I decided that I didn't want to be on the medicine this winter because I do a lot of open mics, and the benefit that I get from doing them, having a social life and singing my songs, outweighs the risk of getting sick. So I just asked my neurologist, can we take the winter off from the Ocrevus? And I've not been on the medicine since my diagnosis. This is the first time that I'm really seeing what I feel like again. And I feel more like me than I've ever felt my entire life.
So from what I know, from observing you, I would agree with you. You're more like the Jim that I knew in 2007 than even 2000, 2001. Like there was a period where clearly you were going through it. And you talk about as much as you want to, or as little as you want to, but you were clearly going through it, and you were getting just Hail Mary windmill kind of just one shot after the next. And the weight that was clearly on you was, many would consider it insurmountable. Many have considered it insurmountable.
Oh, yeah.
And from whatever it is, spark going out or illness taking you one way or another, a psychological affliction attacking itself, people aren't here because of it, and you are. You're very much here. You're more here than I remember in years and years and years. And if that's a result of coming off the medication, to be charitable, I'd say it seems like maybe in terms of how it interacts with you, it leaves something to be desired. And fortunately, you've found all kinds of out-of-the-box ways to go about treating what symptoms you have and are experiencing. I'm, again, not a medical profession. Don't take anything from me as the gospel of any kind of advanced medical learning. But I pay attention to an awful lot. I'm extremely perceptive. Typically, some things get by me, but not many. But seeing you and noticing who you are and what you're doing with yourself, it's inescapable.
Well, thank you for saying that, Sean. I've approached it holistically because my looking at it was, if I get on more of their pharmaceutical drugs, then I'm potentially creating another problem that long term I don't want. They would offer me any pain meds or not necessarily pain meds, but lots of stuff. Like
Yeah.
they were quick to pull out the prescription pad and give
As
me
many
muscle
have been.
relaxers or give me antidepressants, all this stuff that I don't want to need for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
All these chemicals, they mess with your brain chemistry in ways that they don't fully understand.
Yeah.
They know what works for a lot of people, but they don't necessarily know what's going to work for you.
Yeah.
And let's face it, I'm not like a normal run-of-the-mill person. So what they're going to give to me that affects other people is not going to be the same as me, because my approach and my mindset is very different.
Right. Yeah, and the way that you live your life. You don't strike me as the guy who needs everything to be exactly so.
Mm-hmm.
And you follow exactly how you've always done it. And I think that's, if you're not a person who's capable of going outside of that without your entire reality coming down, I don't want to throw shade. I mean, I don't want to diminish the procedure followers.
Mm-hmm.
But there are lots of different ways of constructing procedures, and getting too entrenched in what has always been done is a great way to never develop.
Right.
And I think what you're doing is you're, with your own life, forging a path, and all the respect I can possibly muster to you for that.
Well, thanks.
That is some baller ass shit what you're doing, man.
Thank you.
Admirable, really admirable.
It definitely takes guts,
It does.
because it would have been easier just to take their meds, just do what they want,
Again, not medical advice. If your medical providers have you on a course of something, talk to them about it.
And
We're
I
not
wouldn't-
telling you drop all of your medications tonight.
I
We are
wouldn't
not saying
tell
that.
anybody to do what I've done. I would only be willing to have a conversation about the things that I've done and why I've done them and what I've experienced. But
And that's what we're doing.
anything other than that, it's pure speculation, and it would be guesswork at best. So
I hope everybody has the opportunity to, at some point, have the courage to live in a way that you do, and that I try to, and not be so confined to doing things the way that you've been programmed or told to. I think there's a whole huge world that exists simultaneously to people who don't realize there's a lot more to it than what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You may be maximizing in your alley, but if your alley represents an extremely defined parameter, you don't realize that not only is there 360 degrees of alleyways around you, but there's all kinds of different dimensions simultaneously existing around you.
Well, with an MS diagnosis comes a lot of scary things, especially being I'm a fine artist as well as a guitar player.
You are.
singer.
I would acknowledge and agree with that.
So a lot of those things were at stake too. Everything was at stake. I was losing my hand-eye coordination. So the drawing skills were starting to call into question. The guitar skills were a thing for a minute. And when your back's against the wall and you're looking at the prospect of losing everything that you've worked on your whole life, it's gonna, there's gonna be a shift.
It's going to be terrifying for
Yep.
one.
Yep.
But once the terrifying has been there, long enough, identified that that's what you're being is terrified,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully you have the fortitude to start analyzing. Because once you
Yes.
start understanding, things become less scary.
And then I thought,
Fear of the unknown.
I kind of channeled Barbara, my late wife, and her approach to things was very simple. We got a problem, how do we solve this? So I thought about the MS like that, like she would. And that's been the blueprint for how I've designed whatever success that I've had or whatever progress that I've made in the last few years. I credit her, even though I did it, because I had to draw on that inspiration to get through and to make those calls. I'm an Italian kid. I grew up on pizza and pasta. You're telling me I got to give up dairy and gluten?
Dairy and gluten.
Are you serious? Like my favorite things ever? I
Like
gotta
the
give them
majority
up?
of what pizza is.
Yeah, exactly. It may as well be a gluten buffet.
Yeah.
But I did it.
So all I can eat is tomato sauce? I'm not supposed to eat tomato sauce either?
Well, that's processed. That's considered processed food. All
It's
processed
tomato.
food's yeah, but it's still processed. If it's in a can, it's been
Oh,
processed.
no, I mean, it's to, even if you make your very own tomato
Oh,
sauce,
yeah.
supposedly,
Right.
the tomato is one of those things that you're really not supposed to eat.
It's a nightshade. It can be inflammatory.
Can be.
Yep.
Probably is.
Probably.
Don't care.
Right.
Until I get MS, and then I probably have to care.
I still eat tomatoes, even though I
Yeah.
know they're a nightshade. I've cut back on them. One of my favorite meals is taco salad. I have taco salad almost every day.
Oh my God, I love taco salad.
And the tomatoes, I just cut them out a few months ago. A friend of mine told
Do
me.
you feel a difference?
Not really. I don't think I ate enough tomatoes
Okay.
that it would have made a huge difference anyway.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been long enough for me really to say. Plus, there's so many things I throw at this that it's hard to know exactly which one is serving me best.
Yeah.
That's why I got an MRI done about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So this would have been 3 months after the last infusion, 3 months off of the medication. My latest MRI showed no new lesions. The development of my condition is not developing further, even 3 months without the medication that they said was helping me.
When's the next benchmark?
That would be 2 months from now.
2 months from now. Okay, that's going to be a really interesting one to see.
Yep. And before they put me on the meds, I'm going to ask to do the same thing. I want to see what we're looking at. I want to be on the same page, because if we're just going to keep putting poison in my body, if I have to be on this poison for the rest of my life, the side effects from the poison mimic a lot of MS symptoms. Brain fog, fatigue. I have a lot of that stuff as a result of having MS, but the medication made those things worse.
Yeah.
For the first time in 4 years, I'm able to multitask right now. I can think about more than one thing at once. And for the last 4 years,
Not a thing.
it was nearly impossible. Like,
Wow.
I couldn't focus on why I went from one room to the next. Like, my short-term memory was virtually destroyed.
Yeah.
And my brain capacity was just not there.
Yeah.
And so now, off of the meds now for a few months, I'm clearer and sharper than I've been in many years.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that plays out. And for me, it seems to be the right decision.
Well, I really hope things progress with Ibogaine as fast as possible. There's no downside that can possibly be put out there as long as it's done in the right set and setting. From what I understand, there's some cardiac things that go along with it. So what's being said is it should be legalized. It should be administered in a set and setting where there's people who are familiar with intervention in cardiac various cardiac scenarios, and you should be monitored, but it shouldn't be illegal because of the giant upside, particularly PTSD and regenerative properties with neuropathy. So just those things alone, I mean, think of the medical conditions that can be reversed, particularly MS. If that's part of what's happening is a degeneration of neural pathways, if this thing aids in the development of them.
Well, I've been holding back on telling you this because I know you're going to be so psyched to hear me say this.
What do you got?
I have a drum kit at home. I'm pulling it out and I'm setting it up in the living room. Why? I don't really play drums. I know a couple beats. I'm not really very good. But if I use guitar to cure the neuropathy in my hands, who's to say I can't use drums to help combat the neuropathy in my feet and get the coordination between the brain and the body that much better?
I bet you can.
I'm going to.
I think you should.
And the other part of the story for me is, so what does all this mean? Where does all this leave me if I used music as part of my healing process and my healing journey? Where does that take me next?
Yeah.
That's as clear as day to me. I want my plan, my goal is to become a music therapist for other MS patients
Awesome.
so that I can help other people in my situation through music therapy, or we can talk about a holistic approach, that kind of stuff. Like, I want to help other people with MS because I was alone for so much of it, and I still am in a lot of ways. But if I can help even just one other person, then all this won't have been for nothing.
Well, it's not like you're trying to say do away with medicine. What you're saying
Right.
is here's another tool.
Here's other
If you-
options to look at.
If you
just
want to literally
consider.
say you threw everything at it, throw this at it too.
Mm-hmm.
Try this out because this is what it did for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 100% support that. It's a great idea. And I hope it works and I hope it goes well for you. Talking this through made me, it's like I have something vividly popping into my head.
Okay.
You know how we've always kind of understood, or it's been understood, it's probably going to be debunked at some point because most science always is, that we only really at any given point in time use about 10% of our brain.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at your brain as access to your brain as being a highway, if it's a 100-lane highway and you're only using lanes 43, 47, 52, those 10, if MS is taking out lanes, it may not be taking out lanes that you're using.
Oh.
If it takes out lane 43,
Very interesting.
there's no saying that lane 42 is also taken out. So if you relearn something that you used to know how to do, but you use a different path to get there, there's entirely that possibility that you can relearn all of the things like you're talking about. You just think about it very, very deliberately, intentionally in the moment so that you can walk to the car,
Sure.
so that you can play that lead. If you re-teach yourself how to do something using different pathways, it may be that you have access to all of those things again. You just can't do it the way you've always done it.
Right.
As long as you're adaptive and you're capable of processing new change and constantly learning, maybe that's a great way to preserve life
And
with MS.
it's, my neurologist said to me, I fired my first neurologist and got the neurologist I have now. And she said to me, the first meeting we had, she said to me, one of the things you got going for you, Jim, is that you're a smart guy. I can tell that you're a smart guy. And I said, are you sure that's working for me?
It's so often a burden. Why don't you tell me how that's a good thing and I'll believe you.
If ignorance is bliss, I'd rather not understand any of what I'm going through. But you're right, I do understand it. And she's never tried to dissuade me from any of the things that I've done. So she told me I was maybe her only patient, or one of a very few patients that when she leaves the office after meeting with me, she's happy. And I said, why is that?
That's really cool.
And she said, because I'm a neurologist.
Yeah.
Most of the news isn't good.
Oh, how cool.
She said, so when I see
What
you.
a beautiful thing for her to say to you.
Yeah, I was moved. I'm still moved by it. And she said, so when I leave the office after meeting with you, I'm inspired and I'm walking on clouds. Like I feel like you're
that's
such a
fantastic.
positive beacon of light.
Yeah.
Given everything that you've been through, it's pretty amazing. She's like, so I look forward to seeing you because I know the meeting's gonna go well and I know I'm gonna be happy that I saw you. incredible. You can't make this stuff up.
That's really cool. Well, you can.
I'm not that clever.
I've heard this said before. Have you seen Star Wars? They literally made the whole thing up. People make all kinds of shit up. But that one, it sounds like that one was from the heart. And it sounds like you do actually, just by being you and living the way you're living, have a positive effect on others. Living testament, I can say, you have a positive effect on me.
Thanks.
I want to do good. I want to help everybody that I can possibly help because I know how hard it can be. Not just because I've been through hardships, but because I know others who have as well and how hopeless it can really get.
It's that symbiotic relationship
Yeah.
things, right? So when we work together and we work in tandem, the whole pool gets more energy and more motion in it. And then we're all guided along that motion because we put that energy into it.
Yeah.
So it's bigger than us. And I think those of us that are smart understand that. And the ones that are too smart can't understand that.
Interesting. How would it be that somebody would be too smart to fully understand? Wouldn't it be that they haven't allowed themselves? Is it necessity?
Well,
If they haven't been in a position where that situation necessitates that they learn something to the extent that they can use a new thing, does it mean that they're operating the way they always have because they haven't been forced to learn a new way? If you're just crushing on all cylinders, a lot of times the natural human response is to say, don't upset the apple cart. Don't rock the boat. I'm crushing. I don't want to change anything. That in itself is a prison.
yes.
If you're not willing to be a beginner, if you're not willing to learn something completely new, you're in prison. You're stagnating.
This example might be a really good one to illustrate what I'm talking about. The smartest person I know is a C+ programmer.
Okay. I knew that one once.
Maybe it's C++. I don't know the terminology, but he.
Nobody uses C+ anymore. It's so passe.
Right, but when I
C++.
met him, that's what he was doing,
C++.
and that's kind of how I know him.
Since
And
1994, C++.
requires like really smart, sort of like blah blah blah, like brainiac
Yeah.
to do that kind of work. And he was really good at it. And I don't know what he's doing now. It's probably been automated by now, but he was so smart. He knew just about anything about music trivia, history. Like you could ask him anything, and he was just like an encyclopedia.
Soaks it
he knew
up.
so much information. But the one thing he didn't have, and still doesn't have to this day, is people skills. He's been single for the almost 40 years that I've known him. He's only had flings or temporary relationships. He's never had a real meaningful, serious relationship because he's too smart for his own good.
Yeah.
That's an example where you can be so book smart and know so much, and while he's having dinner with this date, he's hyper analyzing her every move, her every decision, and he's trying to figure out what her next move is and how he's treating it like a video game instead of being present in the moment.
Yeah, that's
Too smart can bite you in the ass.
something that I struggled with for years and years and years, and I'm not trying to put myself in his boat. But I discovered in my own trials that you have to give space to people developing and learning at their own speeds. And if you are with somebody that is great in all kinds of ways, but has flaws in others, as long as that person is without ego and committed to learning and developing themselves, there's no saying that they don't learn that thing that's a problem a year down the road and work to correct it or to fix it or to evolve past it. So as long as a person is committed to self-analyzing, not getting into a shame spiral on themselves and literally accomplishing nothing, that doesn't benefit anybody, but developing themselves as a person and being open and honest and not, too stuck on themselves or closed down because they're afraid of learning or they're afraid of shedding bad habits or bad ideas. If you make your ideas who you are, you can't evolve. You create your own prison. You have to be able to say, I did have that idea and that was a bad idea and I let it go. There's no reason to hold on to it.
Right.
Your ideas can't define you to be an intellectual, because to be an intellectual, you're constantly trying to learn a new thing. And if you're holding on to a thing that isn't correct, you're not learning. You have to let a thing go so that you can learn the right way to, or the right understanding of. So as long as a person is committed to developing, you just have to kind of sit back and go, I can deal with that one. It's fine. Just let it, give them grace. Give them that space to learn and evolve. I was very critical for a long time, a lot longer than I should have been, and held things against people that I'm sure they've grown out of by now, and it wasn't my place to tell them, this is a flaw of yours. How's that work out?
Yeah, right, yeah.
When you tell a person that you're dating, you're like,
right.
here's all of your flaws. How's that go? Not great. But it doesn't mean that, if you really like that person, you can't kind of tolerate and, just give them that space and, allow them to develop as a person and just enjoy them for who they are in that moment and just appreciate as they're growing and developing all those hurdles that they're getting over. That's part of being in that kind of, I hope he figures that out.
I do too. The problem with him is, if we're going to make the musician analogy, he already knows everything. He already knows what the drum parts.
Well, we found
He's not interested in what you think they should be. He already knows.
We found his then, didn't we? That's where he's stuck.
Yeah.
He'll get by it, hopefully. I hope he does.
Maybe not. I can't worry about other people anymore.
And you should.
I did that for most of my life. And,
Yeah. It's his thing to figure out.
that's it.
I hope he does.
And me too. And I'm also thankful that he's not a musician, because he would be a very difficult person to be in a band with.
It'd be impossible. Impossible to be in a band with. Oh, that's so hard.
And I will say that before I started taking guitar lessons, I was in a band with some grade school peers. I wanted to be in a band so bad because I just thought it was so cool.
I love this. What was the name?
I don't know that we had a name.
No. Okay.
The very first official band that I joined was Legal High. Was
Legal
the name
High.
of the band? Yeah.
I love names.
And meanwhile, 3 of the 5 members smoked weed.
Yeah.
So the name was BS anyway, but our parents loved it.
Yeah. As long as they're getting a kick out of it and not yelling at you for it.
But the first band I was ever in, we didn't even have a name. That's how infantile it was. But what I learned right away was how much fun it was to be in a room with your friends, all doing the same thing, creating something together.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And when we were on that song and everybody was hitting the marks and the changes were right and the guitar player was in tune and the bass player was in tune,
well, you
there
become
was
one
some
organism.
magic. Yeah, you become the music in those moments.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we're looking for. That's the rabbit in the dog track.
To me, when it's all clicking like that, that is the closest you can come to feeling as though you and your 4 friends are Voltron. It's all locked in, and you're doing something way bigger than any of you could do alone.
And the essence of us being bigger than me. Like it's really about that. And I think when people understand that, that's when the real meaningful music comes from.
Yeah.
My project that I've been working on, I mentioned earlier that I go as a performer at JCal when I do singer-songwriter things. Now I'm taking that into the next phase of my musical development. And the name of my band will be JCal with the Difference, spelt with a TS. The premise of the Difference is this. We're going to have a bunch of my songs and some covers that I sing, and if somebody else in the band sings too, then I'll share those duties.
Cool,
It's not all about me. But the premise is going to be this. We're going to all know these songs to be played a variety of different ways. So the difference will be different every time. You may come to see us, the first set might be a reggae set. The second set might be more straight ahead Radiohead rock, like my roots, my self-indulgent guitar player roots. And if there's a third set, maybe that'll be more stripped down Americana. I'll just pull out the acoustic and maybe play some slide guitar or whatever and have some guests on that. So the premise of the Difference is that it will always be different.
You want to know what's wild?
What's
you
that?
just said that I was going to love this. I do. Cursed on Earth was talking a couple of months ago about every time I approach writing rhythms and percussion to a Cursed on Earth song, which are unique works of art unto themselves, every time I approach writing to them, I come up with 4 or 5 different feels to take the song. And we settle on one that everybody kind of likes the best. But I can play almost all of our songs 3 or 4 different ways and completely change the feel and the way that that song comes across.
So you get exactly what
So
I'm after.
what we talked about doing was doing an album that's specifically all of these different songs played completely different ways, and putting out another album that like not just redo an album but all completely different, but an album of all of these different songs that we do just completely play differently.
You could do it like a Sybil type thing where each album could represent a different personality.
Interesting.
Just food for thought. Just came up in conversation. My departed wife had a guitar strap company. She made guitar straps by hand.
That's cool.
And she named them Sybil guitar straps because I had come up with a name, Sybil, for one of my bands because my college friends used to call me Sybil because I played in a cover band, and 1 minute I would be sitting perfectly still, and the next minute I would be breaking the stage or, going crazy with that kind of stuff. So they called me Sybil because the music was always different, and the way I reacted to the music in that cover band that I was in at that time, they called me Sybil. So I developed a logo for Sybil and was going to use it as like a fictitious band, and then Barbara said, nope, I'm using that as my guitar strap company. And that was that. So Sybil Straps was born then.
Yoink.
And then the band name faded away because of that. So JCal with the Difference, it's a play on words because the difference being obviously that I'm different now than I was. I'm not the person I was when I was in my 20s with the MS and everything that I've been through. I think we all go through a lot.
And you have a different approach.
Yep. Plus, I like the idea that it'll be different. Like, we might not even know what we're going to do until we get there. But we'll be able to play these songs in a variety of different ways. And that's the goal. That's the idea of JCal with the Difference.
That's awesome. I look forward to hearing what you're doing with it. I really do. And to seeing who you rope in and like what kind of takes come out of what your brain's stewing over there, because it's going to be really cool to see.
I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want there to be conflict with anybody.
No reason to at this point.
Necessarily right. It's still sort of like fresh. I do have a rhythm section that I've played with for 30 years on and off that have agreed to do a working demo with me. So
Hell yeah.
that's going to be how that starts.
That's a good foundation.
And those guys, I can say that freely. It's Tim Stackpole and Adam Hoare on drums and bass, respectively. I played 30 years ago in a band with them called The Leftovers. And they were my rhythm section in that band. So putting this new project together with people I felt comfortable with, it seemed like starting with them would be a logical place.
Totally.
They've agreed to learn the songs, help me get a 5-song demo recorded. If they want to play with me after, they're welcome to. And if not, I'll find other people then.
Sure.
Because it's a pretty different sort of idea. It's going to require somebody that's willing to take a chance.
Yeah. And by the nature of it, there's not necessarily fingerprints to the music, you know?
Right.
It can evolve and it can be breathing and it can have lots of different influence.
And the added bonus to all of this, Sean, is that now I get to play these songs that I wrote, some of them, most of them, in different ways. And then I can see in the room or the venue what the reaction is
Yeah.
between us and the audience, and what are people really reacting to? How are they reacting to this? So that when I put an album together and think about the show, I can think about the development of the peaks and valleys of the emotion, the color, and the texture that coincide with the music.
It informs your communication of your art that much better. I think that's a fantastic thing that open mics do that a lot of people who are more established musicians overlook. And it's not about going out and seeing, okay, what are people going to go wild over or not? It's seeing firsthand, up close and personal, with no stage lights hitting you, how people are receiving what you're doing. Is it being received, or are you missing your mark?
Yep.
And just those little bit of, nudges, those little bits of refinement that you can get from that, it helps you make a much better, more concise product. If I hate to call it product, but end result, I should say.
Sure.
Your piece. Well, what a fantastic conversation this has been. I would love for you to come back and talk more.
Absolutely.
In the future about not only how things are going with MS and the way that you're approaching it, but also to hear J. Cal and the difference, and what you come
With
up
the
with.
difference.
With the difference, and what you come up with there, how that evolves and takes shape. Are there any things that you want to plug that should turn people on to, the ability to follow you? Do you want people following you online, or?
Well, my joke at the open mics is that if you want to look for me, you're not going to find me, so I guess I'm on social media. However,
Right
with the advent of the new year and getting people to work with me on getting a working demo recorded, that's going to change pretty soon. I'm hoping by spring that the demo will be released. On that note, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. I'm also going to do something that I don't know that I've heard of before either. When I decided to put another band together, I thought, well, how am I going to reinvent myself? And one of the ways that I want to really think about the way that all this comes together is I kind of want to see what the course of the music does to the music too. In other words, I have these songs. I look at songs like pieces of clay.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see what comes
you turn it
out
into.
of them. But to tie back to the point I was trying to make, which is the 5-song EP will be recorded pretty soon. Now, when I put out the 5-song EP, I'm going to put it out 3 different ways on the same day. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that the first version of the record will be my version, my take of it. Those songs interpreted with a lot of self-indulgent guitar work. I'm just going to be blatantly honest. I love effects, and I'm really clever with lots of effects. So it's going to have a lot of that Pink Floyd, Radiohead,
Sure.
Deftones-y, early Korn type stuff. Like the first version of the 5 songs will be like that.
Sound seeking.
The second version will be more of an Americana take on the same songs. So the rhythm tracks won't change. Probably the vocals won't change much. The arrangements might change a little bit, but I want to bring in some friends that I've met through the open mic circuit. I have one friend, I'm going to have him play some honky-tonk piano stuff.
Cool.
I've got another friend who's an old-school jazz trumpet player I've known for many years. I'm going to have him sit in and play some trumpet. So the Americana version of the same 5 songs, I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but the vision is that this EP will be packaged in 3 dimensions. So it'll be a 3D release of 5 songs. The first version will be mine, the way I envision it, the way I want to have fun with it. The second one will be more of a stripped down Americana kind of rustic take on those songs.
Yep.
The third version will be a mix of both of those. So bringing in the color of the different instrumentations to come up with a third dimension or a third sound. So the 5-song EP will be released in 3 dimensions is my vision for it.
That's awesome. I can't wait to check that out. Well, if people want to find you, then go to the open mics, because it seems like you go to a lot of them.
I do, 4 or 5 a week.
That's awesome.
If you want to find me on social media, you could find me on Facebook at Jim Callery. If you wanted to find me on Instagram, I'm 603JCal, 603JCAL. And that's where you can find me, and that's where my music will be planted, and it'll start to grow pretty soon.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see it. This is literally my favorite part, is watching blooms and watching people digging around in the garden, seeing what they can plant and what they can grow and what they can make.
And it's especially interesting given we have like a long history.
Yeah.
Going back to early 2000, I would think was when we met right around
A lot to pull
then.
from.
Crazy to think how much we've both changed and
It's a
how much we've come.
long, windy road, my dude.
Never would have imagined we'd be sitting having this conversation 25 years ago.
Jim, I love you, brother. I'm so glad you are who you are and you're doing what you're doing, and I hope you never stop.
Here they are. Without these folks, taking Seacoast Entertainer to the next levels wouldn't be happening. Not to this scale. Tangram 3DS actively supports our music and arts scene and has proudly been part of it for the last 20 years. Their creative pros bring vision to life with everything from 3D renderings and VR to video, animation, web design, and branding. As a team of artists living and working on the Seacoast, Tangram considers a thriving local culture essential to us all for the connections we make, communities we build, and creativity we foster. Visit Tangram3ds.com to learn more, see their work, and imagine what they can do for you.